Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for staying to almost the death. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of our experience of converting conventional dairy farms to organic farms in New Zealand. And those of you that know me would realise that this is quite a challenge for me. So I'll just briefly give you a bit of background, how we got there, talk about the timeline of the organic conversion process, and then I'll talk a wee bit about pasture management, but it's certainly not my forte, but I want to spend a bit more time talking about animal health management and what we found out in the process. So in New Zealand we get paid on kilograms of milk solids, and in the past 4 or 5 years that's been a fairly volatile price. Since sort of coinciding with when Fonterra started auctioning the product, I'm sure it's no coincidence. And in around about 2013-14, we had our highest price ever, which was just over $8 a kilogram, and that was subsequently followed in the next 2 years by the lowest price that we'd ever had when it dropped down to about $4. So in 2014, 2015, a lot of people in the New Zealand dairy industry were beginning to question their structure of what they were doing and I guess the long-term strategy. And within that role, people were looking to add value to the product. We produce a commodity product, and obviously if you produce a commodity, it's going to be lowest cost. So there's a number of people looking at things, and organics came into that equation. So the group of farms that we work quite closely with had looked very hard and long as to whether the organic conversion process could be of value to them. So this group of farms, initially it was 10 dairy farms that were managed under a single group, decided that this was the way to go. They managed to negotiate a contract where they were getting $2 a kilogram more than the commodity price, so that's certainly a price advantage. 6 dairy farms, total of just under 3,000 hectares, with just over 6,000 adult dairy cows. And you'll notice if you look at the stocking rate, probably already slightly lower stocked than the average New Zealand stocking rate. I decided to convert to the EU organic standards rather than North American standards. The North Americans are quite a bit different, quite a bit more regulatory involvement and whatnot, particularly around animal health treatments. After conversion, obviously the land was converted first. That process started in 2015, 2016, and after the land is converted to organics, and that's a process of coming off nitrogen fertilizer and things like that, changing the fence posts, all these critical things. The cows and the stock are then converted to organics by the withdrawal of non-organic treatments and so on and so forth. So slightly destocked, so down to about 2.1 adult cows a hectare. There's the timeline. It hasn't come out very well, but the decision was made in 2015. The first audit was in 2016. 12 months later, the farms were audited and signed off, and we're just going through the animal audit sign-off. So the challenge for us as vets is to move away from a sort of typical medicine-based approach. Under the EU process, an animal is allowed to have 3 what they call treatments, and then it has to be removed from the organic process. And it can rejoin the organic process, but it's reasonably onerous. We have to construct a list of treatments that are going to be used, and then if we end up with treatments that are not on that list, they have to be notified to assure quality. Assure quality are the auditors of the process under an emergency form, so it's not exactly very straightforward. All treatments that are used have a double withholding time compared to what it says on the label, and anything that's got a 0 withholding time actually has a default of 48 hours. So there's a number of processes that have to be managed which are quite outside the normal veterinary animal health process. The key thing here is what is the definition of a treatment, and this is where we as traditional vets really have had a wee bit of struggle. So Assure Quality, which is the auditing group, MPI, which is the government agency, and the EU rules, it would come as no surprise to those of you that are involved in these sort of processes that those 3 sets of rules do not align. So really you just have to choose which one you want to work within and hope that the other guys don't discover that that's not what they want. A treatment is a course. So for example, treating mastitis, a course of treatment might be 3 intramammary tubes, or it could be 6 intramammary tubes. That's not defined anywhere. So what we've actually ended up doing is developing our own definitions of what a course is, which is not a bad thing. A treatment, for example, could include a course of intramammaries and a non-steroidal, for example. So I think that's a common sense approach. Treatments can only be used if there's a demonstrated need, so there's got to be an ongoing monitoring process. This is a good thing. There's lots of stuff around being preventative and proactive, which is really of value to, from an animal health perspective. But we do run into some issues like local anaesthetics are treatment. So a bleb of local anaesthetic used for a liver biopsy becomes a treatment, and that cow then can only have 2 more treatments in a year. And then things like teat sealants because they contain bismuth, they're a treatment too. So we've had a number of issues around things that we wouldn't expect. This is a propylene glycol drench. This is another propylene glycol drench. This is okay, but this is not. So one of the challenges that we've had as vets is to navigate our way through that process. I'll talk a bit about that later on. The pasture management has been really interesting. I've just picked out one of the milk curves from one of the farms, and you can see there the actual curve and then a revised curve. We had a bit of a drought, which impacted significantly on our milk production this summer. But more importantly, compared to the previous season, the milk curve is quite different. So this is obviously not using nitrogen. The farmers have had to learn how to farm without urea, which has been quite a challenge for them. What's been really good is planting lots of new pastures. So here's a lovely pasture that we planted with plantain and chicory and different types of clover, and quite different from the normal ryegrass pastures that we'd have in New Zealand. These are quite interesting to manage, and obviously they fix nitrogen in a different way. So it's been a huge learning experience for both the farmers and for us. Winter management too. So we would typically winter on brassicas. We're still wintering on brassicas, but we're undersowing the brassicas with chicory or clover or red clover or white clover or something to fill in the gap. So that management of pasture, because obviously we can't weed spray, has been quite integral. The animal health side of things has been really interesting because these were a progressive group of farms anyway, so they were already doing a lot of preventive stuff. So really moving to organics was a continuation of what we were doing, but there were some significant challenges and quite a number of great opportunities we felt. And then all of a sudden, this happened. Right in the middle of our conversion, we got a Mycoplasma bovis incursion, and all our animal health plans and processes suddenly came right to the fore. So the farms that we're involved in are right down here. That's where we live, right at the epicenter of the Mycoplasma outbreak. So a whole bunch of farms around our area were cordoned off and restricted. A whole bunch of biosecurity put in place. What was really, I guess, pleasing from our perspective is because we had all these protocols, we had very strict biosecurity protocols put in place, we had very strict processes and sort of procedures put in place on all the farms. We didn't really get caught up in that, and touch wood, despite a lot of farms around us becoming positive with infected animals, it hasn't impacted on us. What is interesting is, for example, the focus on milk quality and the preventive aspect, and these farms, as I say, were already quite progressive in their approach to animal health, has continued. So here you can see I've plotted antimicrobial use in PCU for each of the 6 farms. The blue line there is the New Zealand mean dairy farm PCU use, and all of these farms are significantly lower than the mean, and in particular they're hardly using any category 2 or 3, what we would call second or third line treatment, the CIAs and so on and so forth. So it's virtually all beta-lactams and the first line of treatment. So that's a pleasing outcome. We're achieving that through, just as a point, we're achieving that through a lot of cow-side diagnostics, which is not traditionally a process that you would do in New Zealand, particularly in the large herds. One of these herds has got 2,500 cows. And if you look from in the past 3 years, you can see pretty much consistently for all of these 3 farms, the AMU has dropped, with the exception of this one, quite markedly in the past 3 years. So that's an attention to the process, moving towards the organic status, and also having a focus on preventive medicine. I said a cow-side bacteriology, so that's a thing in New Zealand that hasn't really been used widely until more recently. We've got some new technology which gives us a rapid answer within 12 to 24 hours. So the protocol we've got in place is that every cow that gets suspect clinical case of mastitis is sampled, and all cows get a non-steroidal, a long-acting non-steroidal, and then within 24 hours, once we get a result, the decision is made as to what to treat them with. And that's had a significant impact on the amount of intramammaries used. The cost of that in terms of cost per cow, dropping from $3.80 down to $2.40 per cow in treatment costs, while still maintaining the somatic cell count at a reasonably low level. None of these farms, I just want to mention, none of these farms are particularly stunning. This is all our herds in our practice, and these farms are, scattered throughout them all, so they're not particularly fantastic farms to start off with. I'll just move quickly through that. And the same thing with the reproduction. The reproduction output is not particularly fantastic. It's just scattered throughout the normal distribution of our farms. Reproduction has been a significant challenge. Maintaining reproduction efficiency through the conversion process has been really difficult, and that's one of the focuses we're going to have to try and spend a bit more time on in the next couple of years. We have managed to reduce empty rates. So you can see in the past 3 years, the empty rates have generally trended down, although the 6-week in calf rates have stayed around about the same. But that does have a benefit. I think there's a reduction in empty rates and a slight 0.5% increase in 6-week in calf rates. So overall, across the group, that's got a significant value. So obviously, these farms being managed under the organic system, there's a whole bunch of different costs to go through that process. There's a lower stocking rate, so keeping an eye on the benefits is quite important for the investors. So in summary and some conclusions, I mean, there was certainly a large number of challenges for us in the conversion process. The rules have been an ongoing challenge in just aligning the different sets of rules and what we have to do to appease all of the 3 agencies. The treatment issue is ongoing. As I talked briefly, I can talk a lot more about that, but there's 1,300 categorized treatments that are available for dairy cattle use, and all of them have to be classified as to where they sit. And obviously for a vet going out to treat a sick cow, that's quite challenging. In the middle of all this, we had the Mycoplasma bovis outbreak, which is ongoing, so that causes a few issues. But I think on the plus side, the whole awareness of preventive animal health has been really good, the monitoring and the training. We had our biosecurity all sussed because we had to have our biosecurity sussed, so that was a good thing when we had a disease incursion. And then in terms of sustainability and lowered antimicrobial use, one of the key reasons for doing this is to develop long-term sustainability on these farms. So summary, complicated 3-year process. Significant challenges still ongoing, particularly around the pasture management. We're only 2 or 3 years into that. How we match that in a pasture-based system, how we match pasture allocation to feed requirement, that's going to be a significant challenge. Obviously, you need good animal health plans. Need to demonstrate the value. I think there will be value there. I think there's a number of farms that are moving down that organic continuum. And obviously, sustainability, that's the key thing. I think from a veterinary perspective, just thinking outside the box is always helpful. We tend to be quite rigid, so that we've all benefited, I think from that throughout the clinic. And over to you guys, any questions? Thank you very much.